Welcome to Progress in San Diego, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I'm your host, Walter Davis. And for many years, I served in the United States Navy so that American citizens would be free, and I really believe that. After retiring, I discovered, however, there are many impediments to the American people maintaining their freedom. And sadly, one of those is our system of justice, or more correctly, our system of injustice. So this evening, we're going to be talking about the family court system with Eileen Lasher. And before we go into this interview with her representing the California Children for Coalition for Families and Children, I'd like to bring some very shocking statistics to you about children and divorce. This comes from an article by Larry Bilata. And so some of the stats are half of all American children will witness the breakup of a parent's marriage. Of these, close to half will also see the breakup of a parent's second marriage. Among millions of children who have seen their parents divorce, 1 of every 10 will also live through 3 or more parental marriage breakups. 40% of children growing up in America today are being raised without their fathers. Of all children born to married parents this year, 50% will experience the divorce of parents before they reach their 18th birthday. This is also a very emotionally damaging situation for children, and in fact, this is being monitored by the Center for Disease Control. Studies in the early 1980s showed that children in repeat divorces earn lower grades, and their peers rated them as less pleasant to be around. Teenagers in single-parent families and in blended families are 3 times more likely to need psychological help within a given year. Compared to children from homes disrupted by death, children from divorce homes have more psychological problems. So that means that a divorce is more traumatic to a child than the death of a parent, according to the studies. And this is also verified by the Center for Disease Control. The physically damaging statistics about children in divorce. Children of divorce are at a higher risk to experience injury, asthma, headaches, and speech defects than children whose parents have remained married. Following divorce, children are 50% more likely to develop health problems than 2-parent families. Children living with both biological parents are 20 to 30% more physically healthy than children from broken homes. Most victims of child molestation come from single-parent households or are the children of drug ring members. A child in a female-headed home is 10 times more likely to be beaten or murdered. A study of children 6 years after a parental marriage breakup revealed that even after all this time, these children tended to be lonely, unhappy, anxious, and insecure. 70% of long-term prison inmates grew up in broken homes. Children of divorce are 4 times more likely to report problems with their peers and friends than children whose parents who have kept their marriages intact. Children of divorce, particularly boys, tend to be more aggressive toward others than children whose parents did not divorce. Suicide. People who come from broken homes are almost twice as likely to attempt suicide than those who do not come from broken homes. High school dropout statistics and about children and divorce. Children of divorced parents are roughly 2 times more likely to drop out of high school than their peers who benefit from living with parents who did not divorce. So looking at these statistics, the way that the American families are breaking up and being destroyed are directly proportional to a lot of other social problems that we have within our culture. So it certainly points to the fact that people should try to stay together if they can. I watched a number of news reports on CNN and other channels, and it appears to point the blame towards our morality, saying that the morality of the American family has been lowered. While some of that might be true, there are other factors involved in that. For example, looking at the way parents are being treated in our family court system, the way men appear to receive injustice in a lot of the cases, and the way that people are treated based upon their income. In some cases, parents that are low income don't receive adequate financial support or legal support. And in some cases, because people have assets, they're actually taking advantage of, such as the case here in San Diego, where we have the family evaluation system. So without further ado, I'm going to be turning over to Eileen Lasher. And I'm glad I can say your name correctly. That's quite an accomplishment. I didn't think I could say that right. Welcome to the show, Eileen.
Thanks for having me back. I'm happy to be back here. Thank you.
So tell us something about you to reacquaint our audience, because some people may not have seen the first segments that we did.
Okay. Well, I have a high conflict family law case, and my case has been held hostage in family court for 16 years. So it has been very lucrative for the attorneys, and what I've discovered is mine is not an isolated case. So basically what's happening in San Diego Family Court is initially the litigants are skip traced, and the attorneys figure out if they have assets or access to assets, and the attorneys will sit together and say, wow, here's a case. If we can make this case last for 10 years, 15 years, we can both make minimum of, $200,000 in attorney fees. So basically, the high conflict case is nothing more than a white collar crime. And litigants are being victimized right in the courthouse. And one of the big reasons why I'm happy to be here is there is a case that's being prosecuted right now in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it was an international baby selling ring that was ongoing for 6 years in San Diego Probate Court, which is actually supervised by the same judge that supervises family court. So it was not anyone in San Diego that detected this crime ring. It was actually an outside attorney that detected this by looking at the spike in the amount of probate cases. So I'm kind of looking at trends and looking at numbers. If you have a spike in numbers in the amount of something, it usually generates examination by some entity. Let me give you an example. If I used to work for the San Diego Water Department for 12 years. So if a meter reader went to your home, Mr. Davis, and all of a sudden it indicated that you used twice as much water than you did the month before, the water department would let you know something is wrong. So basically you have a large amount of high conflict cases with litigation ongoing for over 6 years. You have attorneys making a tremendous amount of money on one case, and there seems to be no examination. So similar to what happened in probate court, the parties that are responsible to take a look at these stats and notice, well, there seems to be something wrong. This area seems to be generating a tremendous amount of problems. So that would be the supervising judge, Lorna Alksny. The chief executive officer of the San Diego court is Michael Roddy. You also have the special investigations unit within the San Diego District Attorney's Office, specifically Damon Mosler, who should have noticed the trend of the probate, should also be noticing this trend that the high conflict case seems to be a problem. So I have written to the supervising judge, Lorna Alksny, And I just received a letter from her that my letter of concern was in the wrong format. I have also learned that there is another article just written specifically about this problem, that an attorney, Patricia Gregory, has been stealing clients' money. And we're talking about over $100,000. So other people like me are going to the supervising judge.
And she's being prosecuted, is she not? Or I saw
It
something
is,
to
she
allude to
is
that.
being prosecuted, but it's alarming to me that the victims are having to beg the district attorney for assistance.
Okay.
So I actually have contacted also Jason Forge of the U.S. Attorney's Office, who really ultimately has jurisdiction over government fraud. He is prosecuting the attorney that was running a 6-year baby selling ring in
Tell me
San
more
Diego.
about that. What is the baby selling ring? What was happening specifically with that?
What she was doing is she was finding parents that wanted to adopt babies and basically charging them $100,000 that she had a baby who supposedly had adopted parents, but the adopted parents opted out. So it was a scam that she was falsifying documents, and nobody in San Diego detected it. What made it come up on the radar was the large amount of adoptions that she was doing. So it's similar to a person who works at a bank who's a fraud investigator at the bank. They're taught by the FBI to look for patterns. When you see a pattern, you're supposed to say, what's going on with this person is constantly putting in $9,000 in cash over and over again.
So where were the children coming from that were in the baby selling ring? Who would have been taken away from?
No, what it was is they were implanting sperm. They were impregnating women in the Ukraine and bringing them here and selling the babies to parents that were desperately wanting a child.
Okay.
So on the one hand, I think it's great that it's being prosecuted, but on the other hand, I have a concern that this went on for 6 years, and the responsible parties in San Diego that should have seen the trend, the pattern, the spike in numbers, are just taking in the money. It's almost like it's just about the money coming in, so you have the high conflict cases that should be coming up on someone's radar in San Diego. It's the attorneys are actually being rewarded for bringing in this large amount of money.
Okay, so can you elaborate? What is a high conflict case?
A high conflict case is a case that involves other professionals. So it's professionals that work along in collusion with the attorneys to make the case bigger than what it really needs to be.
And who are those? Give me some examples.
Psychological evaluators, which, as we all know, there's 12 of them that are used over and over again. And there's a case in San Diego right now where another litigant, Dr. Tadros, has discovered that Dr. Doyne, the most used evaluator, has falsified his credentials.
Okay.
So basically, when you add this so-called professional onto the case, you force the litigant, in order to resolve this case, you need to pay this man $30,000, and otherwise you're not going to see your children. So basically, you've got this racketeering going on that you take these litigants, you add on a so-called professional, and you distract from really the fair and equitable where you're supposed to just divide the assets equally. You create a distraction and you delay resolution.
Okay, so what you're saying is that some of the officials, some of the attorneys could be benefiting by making sure that families break up. and that they continue the conflict
Correct.
for as long as possible, and that they're not necessarily working in behalf of trying to save the families.
Right.
They're attempting to write the process out as long as possible.
As long as possible. And if the litigant goes in when the child or the children are 3, they're going to extract as many funds from this family as they can until the children turn 18.
And some of these officials have falsified credentials.
Correct. And also the attorneys involved are actually falsifying the documents. Lots of times the children have firmly stated that they want to spend more time with the mother because the father is abusive. In my case, I was married to a San Diego police officer. There was numerous evidence of abuse. So what they did in my case, the court, is they appointed a court-appointed minors counsel who was paid for by the county, and she consistently said that there was no evidence of abuse. It took me 7 years to get the evidence, and when I did obtain the evidence, it was consistent that the children had been actually battered by their father, and it was all covered up. So in my particular case, the protective parent, if you take the child away from the protective parent, it actually also ensures that job security for the attorneys involved, because the protective parent is going to do whatever she needs to do, or he needs to do. I'm not saying that it's always the mom, but in my particular case, I borrowed the money from my family and did what I needed to do to try to protect my children. And it's been extremely costly, and I've never gotten my day in court.
Now, when I did the other interviews with other members of the California Coalition for Families and Children, what I discovered is that there are high-income people, and apparently there's some type of evaluation done
Right.
on the wealth that these families have. So they don't assign poor families to these evaluators.
Correct.
They only assign families that have wealth.
Not too much wealth, because if you have too much wealth, you could actually go after the attorney and sue the attorney for malpractice. This is actually middle-class people. You know, I worked for the city of San Diego. These are teachers, nurses, you know, people that have the steady income coming in, probably have a retirement plan, probably have a college fund. So the attorneys are structuring these cases so that they can loot the assets of a specific income earner.
Okay. And so this is taking away the college funds for these kids, which
Correct.
robs them a part of their future.
Correct.
We're down to our last 10 minutes, and we're going to be continuing this with a part 2 on next week. So what I want you to touch on in this interview before we run out of time is the effect on taxpayers. How does this type of behavior impact the American people in terms of taxes?
Well, the court is, by definition, a financial institution, and it is funded initially by your tax dollars. So if you have a court that it's not running efficiently, the taxpayers are funding this, but ultimately the attorneys are making a lot of money just simply churning cases, delaying resolution, working in collusion with the other professionals involved just to loot the litigants, and then the litigants always have to file for bankruptcy after this. That's the other trend, that after family court comes bankruptcy, and people are losing their homes, and they're losing their jobs because the litigation is ongoing for over 10 years. So a lot of people then they need to go on public assistance because they don't have anything left.
Now, I remember talking to people that were chiropractors,
Yes.
retired Border Patrol officers, etc.,
Yes.
who were very reputable people who
Correct.
told me that they had been destroyed
Right.
financially by the family court system.
Right.
Some of the stats that I have on that is that the average salary for a judge in the family court system in the United States is over $149,000 per year, and that's just the median income.
Yeah, but that's not really what it is. The judge, I mean, $149,000 a year, you have a judge living in La Jolla. It's not that easy to live in La Jolla making only $149,000 a year. The judges are actually servicing the attorneys, and it basically is just a pattern of making sure that the attorneys are doing well and that they're allowed to continue these cases for excessive periods of time. And then the judges, if they allow this to continue, which they do, then they can run unopposed. And if a judge has to run for office, they have to pay $20,000 up front just to run. So if everybody does what they need to do to keep this industry going, everybody's pockets get lined. And basically this white-collar crime, for what reason I do not know, is not coming up on the radar, because any other increase in cancer is going to generate an examination. An increase in E. coli in the county is going to generate an investigation. An increase in probate cases should have generated an investigation. The family court is under the same umbrella as the probate court. So you have a supervising judge who also, the chief executive officer, Michael Roddy, has to report the types of cases to the administrative offices of the court so that they can get the funding. So I do believe that the high conflict cases are not being accurately reported because it would generate an investigation of some sort, similar to a high bill investigation for your water or your San Diego Gas and Electric. You have attorneys that are making an excess of $440,000 on one divorce case, and this doesn't raise an eyebrow?
So then, by reflecting back upon these 18 shocking stats about children and divorce, certainly the fact that the
litigation is going on for way too long.
It's going on too long.
The parents are under
destroying families.
Financial stress for way too long.
Yes.
Issues are not being resolved. San Diego actually gets extra funding because they are on the supposedly fast track. When I went into family court, I was advised 6 months I'm going to be divorced and I will have close and continuous contact with both children. These attorneys are deliberately putting litigants in high-risk situations because the attorneys are placing their financial needs before the litigants and before the taxpayers. Their primary goal is to make a minimum of $200,000 on each person that walks through their door.
So it's a money-making business to destroy these families financially and take away the children's future. And in addition to this, many of the credentials of the public officials that are involved with this have been falsified.
I know for a fact that Dr. Doyne and Dr. Green had false credentials advertising that they were forensic specialists in the area of evaluations for family court.
And this story has been documented on Channel 10.
It has been documented, and Channel 10 actually started the investigation, and Lauren Reynolds was very interested in the story, but for whatever reason, the coverage stopped.
Very interesting. So again, looking at the damaging effects of the family court, and by the way, it is on the radar in many states. As I researched for this interview, I found a number of groups in states like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Texas. This problem appears to be rampant throughout the United States.
It is on the radar, but for whatever reason, it's not generating the investigation that it should. The appropriate party that needs to address this is initially the district attorney's office, but when you have this type of white-collar crime. Jason Forge, who is prosecuting Teresa Erickson right now for what she was doing in probate court, should be expanding his investigation and prosecution to include the attorneys that are looting their own clients.
Very interesting. We're down to our last 3 minutes here, and we're going to be continuing this with a part 2. So those of you who are watching now, you're welcome to come back and watch part 2 of this interview on next week. But I want to make sure that for this part of the interview, you very quickly can close with any important points you want to make. We're down to our last 2 minutes.
Well, I just believe that perpetrating fraud on the court is a criminal act, and it's a pattern that is happening over and over, and it's the same attorneys involved.
Okay, and we're going to be talking about this further. We'll be having another discussion about the family court system and what appears to be happening here in San Diego County and other parts of the country. We try to focus on social justice issues, human rights, and things concerning the environment. And this appears to be a very big story. Going on to Facebook, I've noticed that there's a lot of groups of parents that are disgruntled all over the country with their treatment in the family court system. So this certainly warrants the attention of the American people, and it warrants us all becoming much more involved in monitoring what's going on in our family court system and what's happening with CPS and other authorities. I want to encourage you to come back for part 2 of this interview with Eileen, and please stay tuned. Those of you who are watching now on internet television, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I'm your host, Walter Davis.